All right, hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is how to optimize your life for success. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is first the overview itself, building the foundation of a life that actually works, setting the direction that pulls you forward, executing the daily work that compounds into results, the review, and your action items for the day or the next few days. Now, before we get started, if you want to work with me one-on-one, make sure to book a call from the link in the description or in the pinned comments. And with that said, let's get started and talk about building the foundation of a life that actually works. So there's a reason your life might still look pretty much the same as it did a year or two ago, even though you've probably read the books, you've tried the routines, you've set the goals, you've downloaded the apps, you've watched videos like this before. And what's actually been happening is that you've been trying to live a new life from inside the same old identity, the same old self-talk and the same old subconscious blueprint of who you've always been. So no matter how hard you actually push on the outside, the inside keeps pulling you right back to the patterns that have always been in control of your behavior. And a year goes by and somehow you're standing in the same spot wondering why none of it worked. So in this training, we're gonna rewrite the inner blueprint underneath in the exact order that it has to go in, meaning foundation first, then direction, then daily execution. And by the end of the third section, there's one specific weekly move that ties the whole thing together in a way that most people have never seen. So stay with me all the way through. And just so you know, what you've been trying has not failed you because of you. It's failed because the sequence was wrong. And the version of you that's actually possible is much closer than you might think. So before we even talk about goals or visions or plans, we start at the very bottom of the whole thing. The life you create on the outside is always a reflection of the foundation you've laid on the inside. Now, if that foundation is wobbly, no amount of force or strategy or motivation or discipline is gonna really hold things up for very long. So we begin with four things: the body, the environment, the inner state, and where your attention is actually pointed at all day long. If you get these four solid, then the rest of your life kind of starts to rearrange itself almost on its own. Now, the very first one of those four is the body. So it sits underneath every single thought, decision, and ambition you have. And treating it as the foundation of your inner work is also the first real action towards a life that actually compounds. Now, nothing rebuilds that body more than sleep, where your subconscious processes the day and also weaves the new identity into the deeper layers of your mind. Now, most of that comes down to the basics, to the hours, meaning 7 to 9 of them on a consistent rhythm. And the ones you miss will show up as poor focus and also emotional reactivity. Now, hours alone aren't the whole story though, and quality is really what turns them into real restoration. So you need a cool, dark, screen-free time before you actually go to bed. Screen-free for at least the last hour so that your nervous system reaches the deeper stages of sleep where real repair actually happens. And then the body you're resting all night is also the same one you're feeding all day. And the cleaner that food gets, the steadier your nervous system and moods become over the long run. Now, a lot of that comes down to how processed the food is. And the further the food is from its original form, the more hidden work the body has to do, which shows up in your energy and mood whether you believe it or not. And if you don't, just try it. So remove all processed food and see how your energy does over the next, let's say, 2 weeks. And it's not only what you eat that matters, but it's also when. And eating at roughly the same time each day will stabilize your energy by teaching your hormones, but also blood sugar, to stay steady through the day. Now, a well-fed, well-rested body is built to move. And I like to say that energy in the body is what allows energy in the mind, and vice versa. So some of that movement is strength, where a short session a few times a week will build the sense of capability that then carries into every other area of your life. And just as valuable as the intensity from the weightlifting is also the slowness, right? Meaning long, slow walks, for example. They will reset your nervous system better than almost anything, and the absence of input in that time is bonus points if you just are not with your phone and you're not consuming anything. Will let the mind sort itself, so most of your best ideas will most likely show up on a walk. Now, underneath all of that movement sits something even simpler, your breath, where slow nasal breathing through the nose is really the fastest way back into a calm, centered state. And it does the most good first thing in the morning, where a few minutes of slow breath in the morning will set the tone for the day and also lets you choose the frequency you're broadcasting from before anyone else gets to. It's also not just the morning either, since even 30 seconds of slow nasal breathing between tasks is also enough to pull the body back into a calm state and keep you thinking clearly throughout the day. So anytime you switch between work blocks, you can do 30 seconds of slow nasal breathing, and that will calm your nervous system immediately. Now, your body doesn't necessarily exist in a vacuum, right? It sits inside an environment that's silently shaping who you become every single day. And most people aren't really aware it's happening. So you want to make it a deliberate part of the work. Now, closest in is the physical space around you, which is constantly signaling things to your subconscious. So you want to make sure that those signals actually match the identity you're stepping into. Now, the biggest thing that space signals is order. A clean, organized space tells the deeper mind that life is workable, right? So real attention is then freed up for the things that actually matter to you. And a clean space can also still feel lifeless, though, which is why beauty matters as well, since surrounding yourself with things you find beautiful raises your felt sense of worth and works as a nonverbal affirmation of that your subconscious keeps absorbing. Studies have also shown that if you, for example, surround yourself with paintings or statues, etc., just works of art, your creativity also, you feel more creative. So beyond the space itself are the people inside of it. And the handful closest to you are most likely running a quiet, ongoing suggestion in your mind, which shapes your beliefs, but also your sense of what's actually possible over time. So closest of those is your inner circle, where their standards, their language, their assumptions, they get absorbed at the level you're not even watching and eventually become your own felt sense of what's normal. So the people shaping you don't necessarily all have to be in the room though, which is where mentors earn their place, right? Also books, courses, coaching, etc. Since you just need their voice in your head often enough that their version of reality starts feeling reachable for you and starts feeling actually possible. And believe it or not, you don't necessarily have to do much. You just have to listen to those people more often than you listen to anything else. And you'll start believing that reality is also possible for you. Now, past the people you actually know is everything else you let in. And what you watch and read and listen to becomes your worldview over time, whether you signed up for it or not. So some of that you'll need to cut. The inputs reinforcing the old identity and removing the ones pulling for the past version of you frees up space for the future one to actually become real. Now, whatever you clear out also leaves room to bring better in. That's the whole point. So you either replace them with content and voices that already speak the language of the future you, or you don't replace it and you have some space for a while. If you do choose to replace it, then repeated exposure is how that new identity becomes familiar enough for the subconscious to settle into. So make sure you, again, listen to those voices more often than any other ones. And just as your environment shapes you from the outside, your inner state shapes everything from within. And your nervous system is the silent multiplier on every single decision you make. So when it's stuck in stress mode, you don't think clearly, you don't act in alignment, and you definitely don't manifest the version of you that you say you want to become. So at the base of that state is calm. the baseline your subconscious needs to receive the new patterns you're actually anchoring. And without it, you're programming a noisy mind that can't hold a clear image of who you're becoming. So the quickest way into that calm is, as we discussed, breath, which pulls you out of stress mode and into the state where imagination and intuition work. And is the most direct tool you really have. It's the most controllable one too. Now, breath gets you there fast, and stillness is what keeps you there, since even 10 quiet minutes a day can teach your nervous system that safety is the default, so the chronic stress response starts to settle. Now, calm keeps you steady, and energy is what you actually run on, the felt aliveness that you broadcast from within. And your outer life will only ever match the energy you consistently carry. So some of that energy you create, where movement, sunlight, real food, clean inputs, lift your daily frequency without without you having to do anything else. And the people whose lives feel most alive are also almost always the ones doing these simple things consistently. The rest of it you have to actually protect, since real rest and real downtime is really how energy replenishes. And so you have to protect that time. You have to say no more often, and treating it as a non-negotiable is really what's going to keep it sustainable for the years this actually takes. And where all that calm, steady energy actually goes is really decided by your attention, since where it lands all day is quite literally what your life becomes, which makes guarding it one of the most practical and spiritual acts at once. Now, the active side of attention is focus. And what you give it consistently is what your subconscious treats as real and starts pulling more of that into your life. So the simplest way to aim that focus is really through direction, where you pick a single direction for the day, and a day with a clear point, obviously, at its center has a totally different felt quality from the one organized around reactivity. And once it's aimed, you protect it with a filter, which can be one simple question. And typically, the question is something along the lines of, does this serve who I'm becoming? Is this aligned with the person I want to be? Is this aligned with the person that I see myself as? Or the future version of me that I want to become? Now, that will clean up your day and stop you from losing energy to the parts of your life that you've already outgrown, and to the people that you've already outgrown, and so on. And then focus points your attention, but presence is really what gives it strength, which is the quiet muscle underneath it all. And without it, your focus just will go wherever the next notification points it at. Presence shows up first as depth. So going deep on one thing at a time is really how mastery gets built. And the more attention you pour into a single thread, the more your inner world will reorganize around it. So depth gets quieter and quieter still in silence, right? Where sitting in it regularly is really how you hear your own thoughts again. The signal that's always been there, but typically gets drowned by input and by noise from the outer world. Now, with that covered, let's actually talk about setting the direction that pulls you forward. So once the foundation is there, the next step is really to choose on purpose where you're aiming all of this at. A grounded body in a calm state and protected attention without really having a direction is just a pleasant version of going nowhere. And that's not what we're doing here. So in this section, we set the vision, we set the values, we set the focus, and the decisions that pull you forward almost without any effort. Now, when the direction is clear enough, you stop needing to push so hard. The whole thing starts pulling on its own, and you then start showing up to your own life on purpose. So the very first move is your vision. A real vision is more than a goal list, but rather a vivid picture of the future self you're actually stepping into and the future you actually want to create through that future self that you're stepping into. And it should be mapped across the 4 big areas of life, meaning health, wealth, love, and self, using a simple framework that I call ABTH, which is not really a fancy name. It's really just an abbreviation. But A stands for actual, B stands for becoming, T stands for timeline, and H for how, which is the cleanest way, in my opinion, to turn a dream into something the subconscious can actually aim at, a clear goal. Now, the most physical layer of that vision is your health, where you run ABTH across your body, your energy, your sleep, your training, and longevity, And a strong, well-rested, well-fed body is, I think, the base layer everything else gets built on. So the A is, as we discussed, the actual, an honest snapshot of where your body and energy are right now, without spinning it, without trying to soften it, without trying to make it seem better than it actually is. It has to be the honest truth. And you need to write it down so that the deeper mind has something real to start working with, right? You need to know what your starting point is actually. And so B is the becoming. So we're going from A to B, which is where you want to be. A clear picture of the version of you whose health supports every other ambition. And it should be described in enough detail that it feels like someone you already know. So when you read it, you need to feel that this is an actual person. This is an actual person with their own habits, and it needs to be very vivid and detailed. Now, the T is the timeline, a real by when date, and without a date, the subconscious will put the whole thing under a nice to have, where it sits forever. We need a date, not necessarily to meet that date. It doesn't have to be a deadline, but it gives us a target. It gives us a target for which to aim. Now, the H is the how, the daily practices the future you would obviously already be doing if they had that life, or if they had that health, where the only move is really to decide that version of you starts today. So you need to act as that person today. Now, a healthy body is the base, but it still takes resources to build the life you're actually picturing. And that's what wealth is for. So you run ABTH again across your income, skills, business, and money. And it gives your vision the resources to actually become real, and your contribution the reach to impact more people. So the A is again the actual, honest numbers, skills, and contribution as of today without softening the picture. And a real change only starts from a clear read on where you actually stand. If you don't know where you are, then there is no way for you to get where you want to go, because there is no starting point. So the B is the becoming, which is a description of the future self whose financial life supports the freedom you actually want, drawn through the days, choices, and work of the person actually living inside that reality. Then T, again, is the timeline, a real by-when date that creates focus, aggressive enough that the nervous system takes it seriously, but grounded enough that you can stay in motion the whole way. And again, the idea of the date or the timeline isn't necessarily to hit that date perfectly, but rather to just create focus, create urgency around something and a target so that we actually start moving. Now, the H is the how, which is the skills, the assets you'd be building right now if you are already that person, where the move is really to stop waiting to feel like that version and just act like them and find the information you need in order to make that happen, in order to make those skills a reality. Learn the skills, find the knowledge, find the books, find the courses, find the coaches, find anything that you might need in order to build up those skills, and invest in yourself basically as much as you can. Now, from there, money buys a lot, but it can't necessarily buy connection, right? Which is why you run ABTH also across your romantic life, your family, your friendships, and your inner circle, all of your relationships. So since no amount of money or health can really make up for being disconnected from the people who actually matter to you. So the A is the actual, which is an honest read on which relationships nourish you, which ones drain you, and where you're really holding back, laid out so that the becoming has something real to grow from. Then B, again, the becoming, a clear picture of the partner or the family member or the friend you're growing into. So this is not what you actually want, but rather who you are becoming. Because at the end of the day, we attract the type of people we ourselves are. So you need to describe in enough detail who you are actually going to become. What kind of partner are you going to be? What kind of family member are you going to be? What kind of friend are you going to be? In enough detail that your nervous system can actually start feeling into that role. And then the T is the timeline, again, where you treat becoming that version with the same seriousness as your money goals. Telling yourself this part of you doesn't matter is a mistake. I promise you. Your life, this part of your life, deserves intentional design as well. And a lot of people put their relationships to the back burner, essentially. Now, the H is the how, the daily ways that essentially the future you would already be showing up as in love and relationships, in friendships, the small reach outs, the presence, the time given, all of it lived now. And then underneath your health, your wealth, and your love sits the relationship with yourself, where you run ABTH across happiness, spirituality, learning, and mindset, and everything in your life is downstream of how you actually feel about you. Now, a big thing I want to mention here is all of these things, at the end of the day, if you want to be better in terms of your health, if you want to be better in terms of your wealth, if you want to be better in terms of your relationships, then at the end of the day, that all sits on top of basically how you feel about yourself, your relationship with yourself, and the knowledge and the learning and the information you try to get to become better in those things. Because the fundamental problem, I think, where most people have is that they don't have the knowledge. If you had the knowledge, then you would be better at all of those things. So if you're not, if something is missing, then your task is really to find the information that will make you better at that. And then from there, obviously take action on that information, but finding the information is the first place. And if you have been reading a ton of information, if you've been going through a ton of books, if you've been watching a ton of courses and nothing in your life has changed, then that's because you haven't been taking action. But you haven't been taking action, again, because the fundamental issue is you don't have knowledge on how to take action. Knowledge is always the fundamental first principle problem. So in order to become better in any of these, we need to obviously collect the knowledge, find the information that will help us become better at this. So if we notice that, for example, we constantly have problems with our communication with our family, then maybe it's time to find a few books on communication. Maybe it's time to find a few books on, well, how do I deal with conflict? Maybe it's time to get into a couple of courses, invest in ourselves. Maybe it's time to find a coach that can help us with it if it's a pressing issue, right? All of these things can be learned, but I digress. So when it comes to self, again, you want to run ABTH across your happiness, spirituality, learning, and mindset, and everything in your life is really downstream of how you actually feel about you. Now, the A is the actual, which is, again, an honest read on your inner state, your sense of meaning, your learning, how you talk to yourself, what beliefs are operating underneath your behavior, how many books are you actually reading a year. Then the B is the becoming, the version of you who feels deeply at home in their own life, carrying the inner tone, the sense of purpose, and the quality of presence that every outer goal is really pointing at anyway. And then the T is the timeline. Again, a by-when date for that inner shift. And it's what keeps you accountable to the work. Nobody else is really watching. You don't necessarily have to hit any milestone by that date, but it's really something that will keep you accountable. So if you want to read more books, then if you set a timeline for let's say you say to yourself, I want to read 20 books, then you set a timeline, you set a date by which you will have read those 20 books, and then you do that. And then the H is the how, the daily practices of the more grounded version of you, meaning meditation, journaling, silence, reading books, whatever they are, the reps that turn the inner becoming from a concept into an actual reality. Now, underneath that whole vision sit your values, right? The internal compass that tells you what's actually worth optimizing for in the first place. And without them, every goal eventually feels hollow, even when you hit it perfectly. So values only work when they're actually clear. So you need to get specific about the 3 to 4 or maybe even 5 values that genuinely guide your best decisions in your own words, not somebody else's borrowed list. So, for example, freedom can mean one thing to one person, but it doesn't necessarily hit you in that same way. So it needs to be your own words. It needs to be your own values. So clarity means keeping it short, 3 or 4 or maybe 5 real values so that they fit in your head, since a long list is essentially no list at all, at least if you're starting off with this. And a short list will still need some meaning, right? So you define each one in a sentence, and that sentence has to mean something to you specifically, since freedom means, again, something different to every person, and your own definition is really what makes it an actual compass. Now, clear values are also only useful once you live by them, which is alignment, where every commitment, every yes, every no, everything gets filtered through those values in the background of every choice you actually make all day long. Now, on one side of that is a clean yes, which basically lines up with your top values without convincing yourself of anything. And it feels open and light, where a contaminated yes shows up as tightness or a long internal argument. And if it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no, right? Now, just as important is the clean no, one that you can actually give without guilt, and getting comfortable with it is really how you keep your life pointed at what you already said was important. And you shouldn't feel guilt about saying no to things that don't align with the values you listed. Now, once your values are clear, the natural question becomes where to point them, which is focus. And the move of choosing the one or two areas, the move here is to choose 1 or 2 areas that matter most this season and let the rest be average for now, since trying to optimize everything at once is really how you end up optimizing nothing at all. And there's this lie that we can do everything at once, when in reality, that's not how focus necessarily works. We can do everything at once, but not necessarily all at once. So focus lives inside time. So you think in seasons of 2 to 4 months, maybe 3 months, a happy middle, short enough to take seriously and long enough to actually change something real. So inside that season, you pick 1 or 2 domains and write them somewhere you'll see daily, so that the subconscious has a focal point, and the pick gets reinforced every morning. And a pick only holds if you guard it. So you protect those domains from new goals showing up midway through. So those goals you can write down somewhere else, keep them for later. Most of the time, in about 2 or 3 weeks, you won't have them as goals anymore anyway. They won't be as important as when you came up with them first. Staying with the original pick is really what turns focus into actual results. You need to be able to just pick something and go at it for at least 90 days. Now, while 1 or 2 areas get the push, the rest still needs tending, right? You can't just forget the rest of your life, which is the maintenance work, where they stay in the picture at a minimum level, a floor essentially, while your focus areas get the bulk of your energy this season. Now, tending them means setting a floor, like I said, a minimum standard for the non-focus areas. So, for example, health gets its basic ritual, relationships get a check-in, and nothing crashes while you push elsewhere. Nothing crashes while you're pushing in your business, for example. Above that floor, you let yourself trust, since a handled financial life will make love easier. A handled body will make the work easier. A handled inner life makes everything else easier. So you need to trust that while you're working on another area, it will basically, a rising tide lifts all boats. It will help the rest once you're done there for this season. Now, all of that direction comes down to the decisions you make in the small moments, where a simple decision filter is how most of life stops draining you. And the bulk of your energy right now is going to small decisions that should have been made once and turned into defaults. And that filter is a single question, the question that we discussed earlier, which is, does this align with the person I'm becoming? It all runs on this one filter, a single question of what would the version of you're becoming obviously do in this exact moment. So the trick is really running it through identity, not just the outcome, since the identity choice leads to 100 outcomes downstream, while a single outcome choice only ever gets you that one thing. Now, once identity is doing the deciding, everything speeds up, since that filter makes most decisions faster and a lot lighter than you'd expect, and the energy you used to spend on deliberation will get redirected to actually living the life you're building. So run that filter enough times, and the choices stop being choices at all. You basically embody the identity. They become defaults. And defaults are really how new identities actually lock in for real and stop costing you energy to maintain. Now, defaults are built through repetition, where one small choice, for example, repeated for 90 days, will land far deeper than a big choice made once and never returned to. So you pick small and you stay consistent. And after enough repetition, the thing just locks, since once the decision is a default, it stops costing willpower. And once you move through that transition, the new behavior runs on its own. And so just before we moved into the daily execution piece, a real quick moment between you and me. If you've gotten this far and you can already feel that the foundation work and the vision work is the kind of thing you've started 100 times and never quite finished on your own, then I know for a fact that's a normal pattern and there's zero shame in it. It's also the exact kind of thing that actually becomes real way faster when there's an outside structure holding the new identity in place while you do the inner work. So if you want to see what that looks like to work with us with one-on-one support inside our coaching container, well, the link to book a call is in the description. Just book a call, no pressure attached. Either way, you're going to walk out of that conversation with more clarity than you came with. So with that said, let's actually talk about executing the daily work that compounds into results. Okay, so we've got the foundation steady and the direction is clear. And now we come to the part that actually moves the needle. A foundation and a vision without daily embodiment is really just a nice idea. And embodiment is just the daily act of being a new version of you right now before the world has caught up to it yet. So the work in this section is mostly quiet, repeatable, and almost boring on the outside. And underneath, it's where the whole life slowly changes shape. So we end with the 4 things that turn the inner work into outer results, meaning rituals, rhythm, awareness, and steady adjustment week after week. Now, the very first piece of that daily work is your rituals, which are basically habits with meaning attached, right? This is what rituals are. They're doing something, but you attach a meaning to it. So they are default behaviors that run whether you feel like it or not, and they're anchored in the identity you're stepping into. Now, the most important ritual is the one you do first, the morning, where a simple morning ritual will tell your subconscious mind who you are today before the world gets a chance to define it for you. And most of that morning should be physical, where movement, sunlight, water, breath work will set you into the right state for the day to actually work the way you want. And once the body is awake, the mind follows, where reading the vision, sitting in quiet, choosing the day on purpose, setting an intention for the day will anchor the identity before the noise of the world takes over. Now, if the morning sets the day, well, the evening closes it, where you process the day, you release what didn't serve you, and you reaffirm who you're becoming as you drift off to sleep. So closing it means a short, honest look back at the day, which gives the subconscious clean material to integrate overnight while you rest. So this could be actually a journaling review that you do at the end of the day. And as you actually fall asleep, that's when affirmations can land a bit more powerfully, since falling asleep with a felt sense of the new identity is one of the oldest manifestation moves there is. And I personally think it still works just as well today. Now, between those two ends of the day are the anchor rituals, meaning small ones that are basically placed throughout the day. So it could be a few breaths before a meeting. It could be a quiet minute before a meal. It could be, it could be journaling during the day and actually writing down some of your thoughts. All of these habits keep the new self present in the gaps between the bigger blocks. So anchors stick when you actually tie them to existing cues. So they hold without you needing necessarily willpower to keep them alive over time. So for example, as you drink your coffee in the morning, for example, you could be writing down your thoughts. You could be journaling. Or as you're drinking coffee, you could be taking an ice bath. For example, this is a bit of a crazy example, but I guess for some people it can work. Now, a cue without meaning is also just a habit though. So you attach a short felt meaning to each anchor, which is what really turns it into an identity thing. Now, those rituals need somewhere to live, which is your rhythm, how you treat your time with the same respect as a serious person treats money. And attention spent is the most real currency you have to work with. So the day is really where rhythm lives or dies, where all the inner work either becomes real or stays imaginary. So giving it shape and structure is one of the most important things you can do for the future you. Now, shaping the day means just blocking it basically into a few clear sections, which is where it all begins. Meaning you have a work section, you have a workout section, you have a reading section, etc. And then you follow those blocks, right? You follow that daily routine, you follow that daily rhythm. Now, blocks packed too tight will break you though. So leave some margin where real space between them will let the nervous system stay grounded and the work stay clean and they won't kind of mesh together. So have some buffer times in between them, and then step back from the single day, and you've got essentially the week, where a clear weekly rhythm is also enough structure to support a transformed life without strangling it. So across the week, you theme your day slightly so the mind stops switching context every 5 minutes. So this is for some people. Obviously, for others, having themed days doesn't necessarily work. For me, for example, I prefer every day to be roughly the same in terms of structure. But for others, every day could be different. You can give a theme to your days. And inside those theme days, you keep 1 or 2 slots sacred for the inner work that doesn't show up on any list. Now, all that structure is worth nothing if you can't tell what's actually working. And that's the job of awareness, the feedback underneath it all, since most people grind the wrong things for years without necessarily noticing. Now, awareness is simplest as just daily noticing, which is a quiet check-in on your energy, your mood, and direction throughout the day. Now, that noticing should start in the body, which knows before the mind does. So paying attention to what it's doing throughout the day can be real data. And once you're reading the body, you read the mind, where the thoughts that keep repeating are programming your future in the background, and noticing them is really how you start to choose differently. You can also become better at noticing and awareness if you track things. So if you create yourself a tracker on Google Sheets or, for example, Notion, you can actually start tracking those things. You can track your energy, you can track your mood, you can track your diet on a scale of 1 to 10, meaning 10, for example, is the best you could be at it, and 1 is the worst you could be at it. And whatever you notice will slip away unless you catch it, and that's what journaling is for, where a short daily or near daily journal makes the invisible visible, which is half the battle, I think, of conscious self-creation. Now, on one page go the wins. 1 to 3 real wins, big or small, regardless of the day, to train the mind to keep finding them. I've talked plenty about this on this channel, but writing down your wins is one of the best things you can do for your mindset, and the best things you can do for the feeling of momentum. And on the same page goes for the friction. So one thing that came up, so you can address it instead of carrying it forward. Some kind of a challenge that you might have had, or some improvement that you might have to do in your day-to-day life. And then finally, sitting on top of everything else, you've got adjustment. And this right here is the one I mentioned at the very beginning. This is the single weekly move that I think ties the entire training together. Adjustment is really what keeps the foundation and the direction and the daily execution all moving as one piece rather than drifting apart over time. And the willingness to keep adjusting every single week is really what compounds into a fully transformed life over months and years, instead of another loop starting strong and quietly stopping. Now, adjustment lives in a weekly reflection. Even just 20 quiet minutes, even 10 quiet minutes on a Sunday. I personally do it every Sunday, which is enough to keep the whole thing alive and adjusting in real time. You could also do it on a Monday, whatever you prefer. It doesn't really matter which day you do. It just matters that you actually do the weekly reflection. Now, half of that reflection looks back at the week with honesty and no shame, just curiosity about what actually moved. So it's just free writing what happened that week. And then the other half looks forward to the week to come, choosing on purpose what gets your attention. And then a reflection without a change is just journaling, right? So you end it with a tweak. You need to end it with some kind of an improvement. You need to end it with some kind of a tweak that you will do the next week to improve. And all these small tweaks each week will beat the huge, change your whole life in a day overhauls every single month. So keep it to one small change to try this coming week, not 5. And that's the whole thing. And right after that tweak, you close with a short, quiet recommitment to the vision so that the next week starts from that identity. So you've made it through the whole thing. And the real question now is whether this becomes how you actually live or whether it goes into the pile of trainings you watched once and then forgot about it by next Tuesday. So here's the part where I just speak straight with you. Most people will not anchor this on their own. The inertia of the old identity is too strong, and the same patterns that got you here will keep running underneath every new attempt if there's no outside structure holding the new ones in place while they become your new normal. So if you can feel that inner yes right now, that signal that says this is the season to actually do the work and not just bookmark another video about it, then the link to book a call with me is in the description or pinned in the comments, and we'll have a real conversation about what doing this together looks like for your specific life, your specific season, and the specific version of you that's been waiting on you to choose. And even if a call isn't right for you today, totally cool. Just take one of the 3 actions below and start anyway, because the version of you we've been describing this entire training has been waiting on you to actually choose, and now you know exactly how. Now, with that said, let's cover the review and your action items for the day. So we covered the overview, we covered building the foundation of a life that actually works, we covered setting the direction that pulls you forward, executing the daily work that compounds into results, the review, and finally your action items for the day or the next few days. First, lock in the non-negotiables for sleep, movement, food, environment, attention, and state this week so that the foundation is genuinely steady before anything else gets layered on top. And this weekend, run ABTH across your health, wealth, love, and self, and write out the values and the seasonal focus and the decision filter that flow from that vision. And then finally, build one simple ritual around your seasonal focus, run it daily, and protect a quiet weekly reflection where you notice what's working and adjust the plan as you go. With that said, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.